And we're live. Good evening, everyone. 21 minutes past 5 on a Monday evening. And welcome. I made it. I've been out training outside in the rain, come back, quick shower, quick turnaround, and I'm ready for my regular Monday live session to talk to you guys. Now, I want to just say a big hello to anyone who is watching this on LinkedIn. This is actually my first time live streaming on LinkedIn. So there's a first for everything. This is my first moment. I'm all about being the first. So it's very wonderful to be here. Those of you who watch me on Facebook or on YouTube, hello, nice to see you as usual. So today I want to talk to you about past failures. You can see the message I want to share with you today going across the bottom of the screen. Past failures shouldn't haunt you, they should evolve you. Now, the reason I want to talk about past failures is because many of you are still being haunted by a failure that happened years and years ago. If I think of a particular client, the one who inspired, actually I have two clients who have been struggling with what they have made a past failure mean. So we've been looking at the impact that's having on their present, on how it's causing them to show up in their day-to-day life and in their work, and also the impact it's having, of course, on their future results if they're showing up to their present that way. Now, for those of you who don't know who I am Caroline Flanagan. It says so in the corner of the screen there. I am a speaker. I'm a certified coach. I am the author of Be the First. And I'm here every single Monday bringing you a live session on whatever the topic I'm focusing on with my clients, and each week on the Caroline Flanagan podcast to help those of you who suffer from imposter syndrome and want to stop overworking, overthinking, and start getting those results that you know deep down inside you desire. Get the results, get the recognition you haven't been getting to date. So back to today's topic, past failure. So I want you to take just a few seconds to think about whether there is a past failure that is hanging over you still. Now, there may be something that happened last week that disappointed you, something frustrating from last month. And if you're still in the thick of that and experiencing some sort of negative emotion about that, that's absolutely fine. This is not about saying that failures or disappointments don't mean anything or that you shouldn't experience them. This is about looking at past failure that may have happened 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that's still showing up today. So the client I was talking about is struggling with, actually there are two clients, struggling with the impact of having had a result. The result they got in their degree was less than they hoped it would be, was not what they wanted. And as a result of that, they feel like they let themselves down, that they let other people down, and that somehow it was a huge failure that says all of this about them. And the problem is that all of those negative feelings are basically driving how they are acting in their work. It's driving their approach to how they're showing up today. I like to refer to being haunted by a past failure as one of the secret signs of imposter syndrome. It's actually number 55, which may have you thinking, 55, how many are there? Well, the good news is I have spotted that there are at least 60, yes, you heard me correctly, 60 secret signs of imposter syndrome. And I'm going to be talking about those increasingly over the coming months and looking at ways, well, to help you identify if that's what's going on for you, to help you recognize if those are the reasons, any of those signs are the reasons why you are overworking and overthinking. Now, I work predominantly with lawyers, typically high achievers, but lawyers who are suffering underneath with imposter syndrome. So the overworking and the overthinking is a very common problem, a common issue that's stopping them from getting the recognition that they deserve. And I'm here to help you change that. So the reason why that feeling of being haunted by past failures is an indicator of imposter syndrome is when or because of what you're making it mean about you. If there's something in your past, a result that you achieved that was less than what you wanted, that disappointed you, that was less than what others expected of you, perhaps, then it's quite likely that you are making that mean something about you. Instead of being able to see that as an individual, particular incident, you're making it mean some version of, I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. I don't know enough. Yeah. I can't live up to other people's expectations. And the problem with that is when it's happening in your mind in the present. How does that show up? Well, this is a great way of identifying if it's something that's going on with you, how you know. You have a tendency to be a perfectionist. That means you can't let a piece of work go. You keep going back to it. You keep trying to perfect it. You live in this constant fear and anxiety that something that might not be quite right about it. So you're constantly seeking or striving to do your work to the level of perfection. And I know many of you will really identify with that. Another way in which being haunted by a past failure might be showing up is conversely, strangely, it's procrastination. And that's because you dread sitting down to a piece of work because you have that feeling that no matter what you do, it's not going to be enough, or you don't know enough to be able to do it well enough. All of these being versions of not enough, and all of it being an indicator that you're overworking. In other words, you're working too much to compensate for that feeling of not being enough. Or you're overthinking, meaning you're worrying, you're spending a lot of time in your head, using up a lot of brain power on thinking about whether you've got something right, thinking that you're not, possibly that you're not good enough, anxious, worried about what you're doing and whether it is to a good enough standard, which is absolutely exhausting. Both those things, the overworking, the overthinking, exhausting and draining your energy and your resources away from where you need it most, which is focused on the work that you need to do. Now, if you are someone with a past failure that's still lurking around, still creating, well, negative emotion in you. And how you know that is you feel like shame when you think about it. You get maybe a feeling of regret in your tummy or feel it physically, feeling of disappointment. It may even be where, for example, the past failure is not getting a promotion that you went for. It may be that how you experience that is actually as resentment towards other people. So if any of those emotions are coming up, the resentment, the shame, the fear, the anxiety, could be an indicator that that past failure is still showing up for you today and getting in the way of you, well, fulfilling your potential, which is what we all want and see ourselves performing at our highest level. The problem, of course, on the face of it, and probably how you perceive this issue, is you think the problem is the result that you got. You think the problem, for example, is that you got a 2-1 in your degree, a low 2-1, and it should have been, or you'd hoped to get a first. You think the problem is you got some grades in your GCSEs. And I'm going that far back because that's honestly the type of thing, it's that far back, that's still coming up for some of you. Maybe you went for your first job interview and you didn't get it many years ago. And you're probably thinking that the problem is the fact that you didn't get that job, the fact that you didn't get the grade you expected, the fact that you didn't get the result, and that was disappointing at the time. So what do? Because you think it's all about the result and all about the score, or all about whether you were promoted or not, you do one of two things. Either you want to avoid it altogether. So you pack this failure away into a little box and you put it in the back of your mind and you hope never to think about it again. And maybe if you're unlucky, you're out and something happens and it triggers the memory of it and you feel that shame, disappointment, and perhaps resentment. But ideally, you keep it in that box and you keep it out of the way. And this is such a shame, and it's for two reasons. Number one, it requires energy and effort to have something in a box tucked away. That takes something out of you to keep it hidden. And as much as we like to kind of tuck things away and ignore them, pretend they're not there, they are still there in the background. They're still able to have an effect on us purely by the fact we know we have to keep it hidden, keep it down, shut down that part of us. So it's using up valuable resources and it's still ticking away in the background. The second reason why it's such a shame to box these experiences, even though they're a failure, even though they're negative, the reason it's a shame to box those away and leave them at the back of your mind, try not to ever think about them, is the missed opportunity. I say in the caption for this session that past failures are not meant to haunt you, they're meant to evolve you. That means if you can find a way, build a relationship with your past failures that enables you to grow and to learn from them, then that failure starts to serve you. Then it's absolutely fine. It's more than fine. It's great that you can be able to visit that failure even from the present and extract the value and the gold in that and use that to inform how you show up today and the results that you're going to get going forward. So that's one of the things you do. You tuck it away, and I've given you two reasons why that's not the ideal. The second thing you might do, and this is an either or, you either tuck it away or what you do is you keep it front of mind and you use it to beat yourself up in various different shapes and forms. You basically use it as some kind of a threat that's hanging over you, a threat to yourself. So when you're approaching your next piece of work, you remember that past failure, and what it does is it's a voice in your head, judgmental, critical, saying, make sure you get this right. You don't want to disappoint people again. Yeah. You don't want to let people down. Do you remember that time 20 years ago? It still feels very present, doesn't it? Do you remember that time when you didn't do as well as you should have done or as well as everybody expected? That self-judgment, that self-criticism keeps going on in your head and it basically holds you to ransom. That's why you feel compelled to try and make everything perfect. Yeah. Or that's why you procrastinate because you're so afraid that actually when you get round to doing it, it's not going to come up to standard. That's why when an opportunity comes your way that you absolutely know you should be thinking about, you're potentially qualified for, what do? You avoid it because the voice in your head is saying, well, remember the last time you went for something and you didn't get the result you want or you failed. So you're using that past failure, you're letting it hold you to ransom in the present. And the problem with it is what you are making it mean about you. I want to tell you in this session that the actual fact of whatever that failure was, whatever the issue, whatever the result, whatever the outcome that disappointed you at the time, it's not a problem at all. It's not the fact of what happened, it's what you're making it mean. And if it's what you're making it mean, if it's how you're thinking about it, then look at what that opens up. That opens up the possibility of you making it mean whatever you want. I just want you to digest and sit with that for a second. You can take your past failure and you get to choose what you make it mean. It can mean whatever you want. And what I want to do in the last few minutes of this session is offer you a way of looking at your past failure, a way of making it mean something about you that is incredibly powerful and empowering. So I talk about imposter syndrome and how being held ransom, being haunted by a past failure is a sign of imposter syndrome. And if you follow my teaching at all, you'll know the first and most important thing I'm going to tell you is that your imposter syndrome is not a problem. So what that means is if you've got this past failure and your brain wants to throw up the past failure in a particular moment or in the morning when you're going to work, the first thing I want you to just know is that's okay. It's totally normal. If you suffer from imposter syndrome, then it's part of who you are. You don't need to fix it. You don't need to fight it. You don't need to find a way of getting over it, getting rid of it. It's just part of who you are. And the quicker, the more easily you accept that, the more quickly you can go on to find out what your imposter syndrome is really telling you in that moment. And that's this. It's just a puzzle you need to solve. It's a question about who you are that this particular scenario you're in is requiring you to answer. So, what I'm trying to convey to you is that when the memory of a past failure shows up, right, when your imposter syndrome shows up as a memory of your past failure, you don't need to worry, nothing's gone wrong. But what you do need to do is actively choose what you're going to make that mean about you, because that choice, that decision, is the moment when it decides everything. It gets to decide whether you're the person who strives for perfection, who holds themselves to ransom and is exhausted and stressed and anxious, and therefore overworking and overthinking, or whether you're the person who's able to take the experience of that past failure and make that mean something powerful and extraordinary about you. Now, it won't surprise you to hear that I want the second one for you. I want every time your imposter syndrome comes up for that to be your invitation to reconnect with what is extraordinary about you. And the way I'm going to offer you to do that is with your imposter speech. Now, if you haven't come across any of my work before, your imposter speech is this personal, portable, powerful statement that I have created for you. It's a structure I've created for you to help you connect with and properly show up from the extraordinary, unique, and valuable person you are. It's a 5-step process that excavates your experiences from the past, your experiences up until this point, and reveals to you all of the treasure, I want to say, the gold that is in there. It helps you to gain access to that, the whole process. And what it also does, it helps you create a kind of 5-part speech that helps you use, and which you then use to show up in any moment when your imposter syndrome is triggered. So it's a process and it's a speech. For the purposes of your past failure, then, the particular part of the imposter speech you want to pay attention to is step 4, which is the question, how did you get here? So, what I want to invite you to do is take an example of a past failure that you have been struggling with, that you keep front of mind still, that's holding you to ransom, right? Making you be the perfectionist, making you overwork, forcing you to overthink and doubt yourself. Or that past failure that you've tried to keep tucked away in a box somewhere and never wanted to revisit. I want you to take a look at that past failure, and I want you to focus not on the what happened, but on the what you did next. It's kind of like there's this that happened, but what happened next? Then what? And in that what happened next lies the most incredible message for you about what you are capable of. So, your job then, in order to process your past failures, is to look at a failure and identify what it is you did to get yourself beyond that, to pick yourself up, to keep going, even if keep going meant being miserable every day for weeks and crying but still somehow showing up. And I know you showed up. I know you had to do things, take action, be a person who could come back from a failure. Otherwise, you wouldn't be sitting here today or wherever you are listening to this live. Something in you was able to respond to that past failure, to recover from, to bounce back from, to grow, move on from. And I want you to be able to identify what exactly you did. And here's what you will find in the answers that you provide to that question, how did you get here? Because how you got here isn't in the failure itself, it's in what you did in response to the failure. Here's the kind of thing it's going to teach you about yourself. You know how to do hard things. You are resilient. You are resourceful. You're a fighter. I love that one. That one in particular is so powerful for me when I think of like an incident in the past, a past failure, something that happened. And I think about what it took for me to get out of that, pick myself up and keep going. That's what came to mind. I'm a fighter. So when my imposter syndrome is triggered, and I have the memory of a past failure or anything like that, what happens to me is my brain goes to making it mean that I'm a fighter. I don't let the failure define me. I let my response, what I did next, how I got through it, I let that piece define me. I think I described it on the podcast, the Caroline Flanagan podcast. If you don't subscribe or you haven't listened to that, please go ahead and do that. I talk more about this past failures and other topics on that. The way I described it was as if, like, imagine you're standing there and you've got two doors in front of you, and one of them says past failure, right? One of them says past failure, what happened? And the other one says past failure, what happened next? Like at the moment, up until now, you've probably been opening the door to the past failure and being in the room of what happened. Well, I'm standing here now and I want to invite you to say, acknowledge that room, acknowledge that it's there, acknowledge that there are some painful, maybe negative emotions for you, and having had a disappointing result or not getting a promotion or whatever it was that you were hoping for. Acknowledge it's there. But I want to invite you to come to the other door. Open the other door, because in there is the what happened next, that is about what you did to respond to that past failure. Yeah. And that room opens up a completely different world for you and a different place for you to show up from. So I hope you found this really useful. If you have any comments, any experiences of a past failure that has been haunting you all this time, then I'd love to hear from you. Leave me a comment in the notes below, or feel free to reach out to me. If you want to take this work further, you want to reach out to me, there are two ways you can do that. Number one, come on over to Facebook. If you're not there already, come and join me in the Imposter Speech, Imposter Syndrome Facebook group, where I show up live, yes, but I'm also in there and able to answer any questions that you have directly. Or you can sign up to my newsletter. I will make sure I include that in the notes below if you would like to hear more. If you found this valuable and you'd like to hear more about how the imposter speech is your tool, it's my gift to you to help you not get rid of your imposter syndrome, because your imposter syndrome isn't the problem you need to fix, but help you solve your imposter syndrome. It's just a puzzle asking you who you are in those moments when you're required to step up. And I created the imposter speech to help you answer that question. I'm Caroline Flanagan. Thank you so much for joining me. Whether you've listened to this live or you're listening to the replay, it's been my absolute pleasure. I appreciate you. Thanks for showing up. And I will be back this time next week, every Monday at about 5 p.m. UK time. That's it for now. Take care. Have a wonderful evening.